We're going to explain how to solve the common problem of Django static files not loading in a production environment. This often happens because your production settings differ from your development settings, and Django needs to be explicitly told how to serve these static files. Let's tackle this step by step. 1. Confirm static files are collected. First, ensure your static files are properly collected. In your Django project, navigate to your project's root directory in the terminal and run the command python manage.py collect static. This gathers all your CSS, JavaScript, images, and other static assets into a single directory specified in your write single quote settings .py write single quote file. Important. Make sure you run this command after making any changes to your static files. If you get errors, double-check that the paths in your write single quote settings .py write single quote file are correct and that all necessary apps are installed. 2. Production write single quote settings.py write single quote configuration. Your write single quote settings.py write single quote file is key. In your production settings, likely a file named write single quote production.py write single quote or something similar, you need to configure the static underscore URL and static underscore root. Static underscore URL should point to the URL where your static files will be served, for example, /static/. Crucially, static underscore root should point to an absolute path on your server's file system, where the collected static files will be stored, for example, /var/www/myproject/static/. This is different from static files underscore dirs, which points to where your static files reside in your project directory before they're collected. Don't confuse these. Static underscore root is the absolute path for the collected files after running collect static. 3. Deployment method. Matters. How you deploy your Django project affects how static files are served. If you use a web server like Nginx or Apache in front of your Django application, you'll need to configure it to serve static files from the static underscore root directory. This usually involves adding an appropriate location block in your web server's configuration file. Consult the documentation for your specific web server for instructions on how to configure this. If you use a platform as a service, PaaS, like Heroku or AWS Elastic Beanstalk, the setup will likely differ and their documentation should provide the necessary configurations. 4. Verify debug mode is off. In your production settings, absolutely make sure that debug =sign false. Having debug =sign true in production is a massive security risk. When debug is false, Django won't serve static files directly. You must use your web server or a static file server. 5. Cache clearing. After making changes to your write single quote settings.py write single quote and running collect static, sometimes your web server or caching mechanism needs to be cleared. This might involve restarting your web server or clearing any relevant browser caches. Check your web server's logs for errors that could indicate why your static files aren't being served. By carefully reviewing these steps, paying close attention to the correct configuration in write single quote settings.py write single quote and addressing your deployment method, you should resolve the problem of your Django static files not loading in production. Remember to consult the documentation for your specific web server and deployment platform for detailed instructions.